Welcome to Uncanny X-Minutes, where we bring you the comics behind the movies. I'm producer James.
And I'm Sasha.
And we're watching X-Men The Last Stand, minutes 40 to 50.
Well, do you want to hear what's going on in this minutes?
I do want to hear.
All right. Well, finally, Jean Grey and Wolverine stop making out.
In all fairness, it was between episodes. The whole thing happens between where it changes, so
That's fair.
It's been happening for a week.
They finally stop. And both sides go to the Grey household. There's a big old fight sequence.
Fight.
And Jean Grey / the Phoenix kills Professor X. That was my editor's note.
Thank you. R.I.P. Yeah, it's funny. I almost did what are all the times Professor X has died? And I found this lovely article that was all the times, but some of them were oh, in Secret Wars when everyone just died and then came back in the next issue? I'm like, well, that doesn't count. And they're like, what about this thing where everyone got blipped out of reality for a couple of panels? And I'm like, you can't count that. What are you even doing? The only one that's of large merit is the one time he faked his death, which we've talked about previously.
Yes.
And the one time that Scott killed him.
Right.
With the Phoenix.
Right.
Which we've talked about previously as well. So we don't need to really go into either one because this is kind of the same.
And you know what? We actually have a better show today for you.
We do, because guess what was in that big old fight scene?
Quite a lot. But specifically one showdown. And that is Callisto versus Storm. Dun, dun,
which
dun.
In the movie, it's fine. It's not as big as a comic book fan would want it to be.
Yeah. The core issue with the fight in the movie, and we'll get into this fight is canonical. It did happen in the comics. That is what they're referencing, kind of. But
maybe that's what the matchup is.
Right, the matchup. I think that's a better way of describing it. But the core of the issue is that the fight in the movies is supernatural still. Not supernatural, but you know what I mean? Power-based, right? In the comics, it's a fist fight. It's a knife fight, actually, specifically.
Yeah.
It's just in the sewers.
This is the Claremont run.
So great.
Callisto is leading the Morlocks.
Uncanny X-Men 170 to 171.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
It is a great physical battle. You have that iconic issue cover of 170 where their two faces are up against each other and they're you've probably seen this if you've just walked through a comic book shop before.
As you're perusing popular comic book covers we always are doing.
Yeah, right? Totally normal thing to do. But there's kind of that physicality aspect that Callisto generally brings that I think is a little lost in this movie.
Well, so we said it last week, but we're going to bring it up again. I think we didn't go into detail, but Callisto's not a speedster.
No. Oh my God. Yeah. The powers are all wrong. That's true.
She's half Quicksilver, half Caliban in this movie.
Yeah.
And that's not what any of her power set is.
No.
In the comics. She's basically, let's be honest, she's basically like a Captain America.
Yes, 100%.
She's a tactician. She's got enhanced speed, strength, agility for a human.
Right.
But not to such a degree like a beast.
Definitely not.
So
she's
kind of a, she's barely a mutant.
She would beat Beast via cunning. Not pure strength.
Well, that's the tactician part.
Yes, exactly.
They specifically say that tactician is part of her mutant ability.
They must come up with something. That's the thing. So Callisto is the leader of the Morlocks. We've mentioned them very briefly before. The Morlocks are basically mutants that can't pass, that live in the tunnels. That is a generalization. There is a storyline where some mutants who run away to the Morlock tunnels get changed by Mask to be monstrous. Mask is a different mutant. That's Masque.
We should talk about Mask, though.
We will talk about Mask today. But
because I was going to talk about Mask
today.
We're
definitely talking about Mask today. All right. But specifically, generally what the Morlocks are, you can just say for the most part, they're just basically mutants that can't really pass and therefore are shunned by society and they live there.
It's like Futurama mutants.
Yeah. I mean, the Morlocks are on Futurama are based on something else. And I think these are also based on that thing. Yeah. So,
well, the Morlocks, the name is from the Time Machine.
That's right. Yes.
Which are also horrifying people.
Right.
But it's really funny because I think I even asked you, I was like, why is she down there? Because her appearance in the comic books is very just punk rock.
Yes.
It's usually,
so cool.
It's always cut off sleeved vest, t-shirt, tank top, something, eye patch, shaggy black haircut.
Yeah.
Punk rock and roll.
Yeah.
That's what her vibe is, and a knife.
Yeah.
So I'm like, the way she's drawn is hilarious because it's like, I think she's supposed to not be attractive.
Yes. That is a big part of her character, actually.
Which I guess is why she's down there, but like, she's not unattractive in a mutant looking sense.
It's complicated. That is
Right?
actually such a huge part of Callisto.
Okay, thank you. That's why I wanted to know. Was like,
Yes.
is that part of it? Because it feels like it is sometimes, but it doesn't always narrate on the illustration.
Right. Yes. So there's a couple of things that come into play here. One, the artist who's drawing Callisto sometimes is the spread of like what she looks like is very wide.
In all fairness, there are quite a few comic book artists that don't have a lot of variation in how they draw faces.
Right.
There's a lot that I have a guy face and I have a girl face. And luckily for comic books, as long as the costumes are different, nobody really cares. Like
I
John
care,
Romita
but-
Jr.'s faces are basically all the same.
Okay. I don't feel confident enough to say that out loud, but I support you.
I think his more modern stuff sure is.
Okay.
He definitely had more of a spread in his earlier career, but like I'm reading his current Spider-Man that he's drawing. Everybody's looking about the same.
Okay.
I just how I feel. Like
That's fair.
There are times where someone's talking, I'm like, who are you again? Who are you supposed to be?
Sometimes Bobby Drake or Cannonball or Angel. Angel usually the
Has
wings give it
wings,
away.
yeah.
But if he doesn't,
Right.
or those three are
That's
in a
what I'm
room,
saying.
I'm like, who is that blonde man?
So my point is, Callisto, her unattractiveness doesn't always translate because some people don't know how to draw like an unattractive person.
I would agree with you, especially women in comics.
Yes.
I feel like they really struggle, which is unfortunate because I think that part of Callisto's character, literally as written in the comics, is about not being conventionally beautiful.
Right.
But that's not where she starts, interestingly.
Okay.
So Callisto's backstory is not really there. If you go back in the old issues, a lot of it is like very vague. Very vague. There is basically what we know is that there was some sort of incident, not necessarily, it's not her mutant transformation, so it's not related to that, but there was some sort of incident. She was conventionally attractive and she becomes like quote unquote mutilated and loses her eyesight in one of her eyes. That's why she has the eye patch.
Right.
She realizes that society has no place for beautiful women who are no longer beautiful, quote, and leaves to live and founds the Morlocks.
Okay.
So at her core of that, I feel like that is really important.
Yeah.
You would think, and I could not find a story that really went into it. I found stories that
I didn't either.
addressed this
Yeah.
concept later, that where they were messing with it in ways that maybe I didn't love, but at least were interesting. But I didn't find, and I don't think there is. I feel pretty confident saying I don't think there is an origin story for her, like like they just did with Mystique, for
Right.
example. I feel like the situation is ripe for this. In all fairness, I have not read the newest releases, so caveat on that.
I mean, any of the new stuff I've read is
Like in
nothing of her
Marauders?
it's just nothing about her backstory.
Okay.
She's just helping out.
So that's what I
put
assume,
her in
but
places of power.
okay, great.
I didn't even reread that stuff because I didn't recall it being particularly interesting as part of her like full arc.
Overarching story. Yeah, absolutely. So she's introduced. She is in the sewers running the Morlocks already.
Yeah.
We've kind of addressed how she interacts with Storm. And so like this is like a main issue. Basically, the Morlocks and the X-Men, she kidnaps Angel to bring him on as her consort. Okay, there's no getting around this. We have to just be literal.
That is what's happening.
This is like late 80s. And
once we said it once and we'll say it again, Angel is a hunk.
he is a hunk, right? And so they kidnap him to bring him down to be a consort in the tunnels. Storm and the rest of the team come to rescue him because she's leading the X-Men at this point in time. And Nightcrawler finds out that there is a way to challenge her officially in order to like have Storm become the leader of the Morlocks.
Yeah, if you challenge the leader to a fight and you win, you are now the leader.
You're
of the
the leader of the Morlocks. Yeah. And so that's what Storm does. It's really interesting because like the X-Men are shown to be at quite a disadvantage because there's a Plague who's one of the Morlocks that can just like make you sick and like everybody's sick because Plague is down there and basically just running rampant with his powers. He's got like everything set up against them. So this is kind of seen as like the last chance. And originally Nightcrawler is the person who finds out about it and puts himself up to fight Callisto. Presumably, given the time period, I assume they didn't want him to like knife fight with a woman. And so they have Storm step up and have like a woman v woman battle.
I could see that. I also could see that she is the leader.
For sure.
So if anything were going to happen, she can't let somebody else do it when she's trying to rescue her own.
That is how they played in the comics.
Right.
I'm mostly thinking meta commentary.
Yeah.
But I think that was the correct decision. It works really well.
Yeah.
Like, I think that was great. And it shows Storm as like a really strong leader.
I feel like nowadays you could actually do it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like,
you definitely can. We've moved
didn't
past
think
that.
anything of it now. But yeah, at the time, you're right. It's probably not playing well.
Yeah. But generally, just think of things like the WWE.
Well, I guess in this movie, it's like, oh, the two ladies are now going to fight.
Right. Yeah. It is kind of weird. Anyway, it definitely feels like wrestling rules where like the ladies can like throw some punches, but they don't get punched, sure. Things like that. It's a kid's book, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, long story short, it was a great decision because it's like one of the coolest fights ever. It's basically Storm is at this huge disadvantage. She's getting beat up pretty badly by Callisto, and Callisto is drawing it out, is mocking her. She sees Aurora as soft, as weak, and she has a little bit of an ego, as most villains are wont to do, especially in the late 80s. She goes on a little bit of a rant.
She monologues for a while.
She monologues, and then that leads to her downfall, and she becomes very shocked when Storm takes a knife and stabs it, like literally into her chest, leaves her for dead, only lives because Healer, which is another Morlock, is down there to save her. But she loses the ability to be the head of the Morlocks.
Yeah.
It's a pretty cool scene, a pretty cool rescue of Angel. I think it's a very fun reversal of the damsel in distress with like Angel kind of like chained up, shirtless with the wings. Like, it's kind of charming in its own way. I kind of liked it. It's the beginning of Storm and Callisto's relationship, which is pretty complicated. There are two X-Men that I primarily associate with her with. One is Storm and the other is Colossus. But that's also because of the time period I was reading.
I was going to say, I that one I did not dig into at all.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, so you got stories.
We've got stories.
Firstly, I just am curious. Do you know how long Storm was leader of the Morlocks?
Ooh, a while. Because she is the leader of the Morlocks through the Mutant Massacre. Because she fails at saving them because she wasn't focused on them enough. And then I know that...
And that's a similar story that happens in the Krakoan era, too.
Yes, it is. And I think
that's all I'll say, so you can read all that.
Technically, I mean, don't they restart the Morlocks and that's when Masks shows up and then they're running the Morlocks for a while? I don't know the exact length of time, but it is quite a while. And basically, the writers forgot about it and then wrote that in as a plot point, which I think is super interesting.
Oh, that's funny.
So basically, it's like
Storm forgot
about the Morlocks and then had no leadership, and then there was the massacre. That's like part of the massacre plot line.
That's great.
And it's just excellently done because it's like, oh, we forgot to write about this, but like, okay, so we forgot it. That's what happened in the world. What are the consequences of that? That's super compelling.
That is.
Right? So I don't know exactly the time. I could look it up, but
no, that's fine.
It's fun. I think that concept is interesting. Yeah, so we lose a lot of the Morlocks after the massacre. They definitely come back or whatever, but it's not quite the same. And I don't think they were a great foil for the X-Men, and they still are in a lot of the issues that they are in. But as like the X-Men kind of expanded from the school to being more representatives of mutant society in general, like you get a little bit more of like the Morlocks become a little less relevant in that sense, with like a couple of exceptions when Chamber is down there with Callisto and he like is fighting with Cyclops because he, whatever. Chamber's always fighting with Cyclops, which that's just a story for another time. But like for the most part, like they're kind of out of the story. So
I read that like couple of issues too, because I was like, oh, that's the iconic one. That's the one X-Men the animated series did.
Yeah.
But then I was like, I have this vague memory. And this is what always happens with comics. You're like, I, for some reason, recall Callisto at one point having tentacle arms.
She does.
I know. So I went into a rabbit hole being like, where does this come in and why and how and where? So I went digging and found another thrilling installment of your favorite comic book, The Extreme X-Men.
Of course. Of course. I don't understand why I didn't realize the tentacle arms started in Extreme X-Men. Of course it was.
Why does Claremont taunt you so?
I truly
You're like, you know what? I'm not going to
assume.
read it. I'm not going to read Extreme X-Men. I'm just going to read the other things that are going on. And he's like, oh, yeah? Well, guess what? All these things happen in Extreme X-Men
Honestly, yeah. It's kind of a punishment for not reading it. Like, it's like, well, you should have, I guess. And I'm like, yeah, I guess.
So Storm gets messed up basically in an underground fighting arena.
Okay. Yes.
All right.
Yes.
And each one has like this weird hierarchy where like each fighting club is connected through a web of different fighting clubs, and there's a champion in each one. And anyway, if you beat the champion, you have whatever fighters you beat, they're all underneath you. Whatever. Masks shows up.
Okay.
And she's beautiful. Gorgeous. Looks a little like Marilyn Monroe.
Okay.
Okay. And she's like, here is my champion, Callisto. And Callisto comes out tentacle armed.
Let's very briefly just say who Mask's powers are.
Yes.
So,
because this is where it comes into play.
Right. So Mask is a Morlock that has the ability to change people's looks, but like
uses their skin like clay.
Yes. Like they sink their fingers into faces. Like there's so many like good shots of that and like rearranging people's features and like giving you limbs and weird stuff. Anyway, this is very important because it's the core of like the Callisto stuff that I'm gonna talk about after. But Mask and Callisto, they don't usually get along, but sometimes they do. All right, keep going.
Well, at this point, like Callisto is working under Mask, but isn't quite pals with Mask. Mm-hmm. There's some other nonsense going on.
Yeah.
Mask gave Callisto tentacle arms for this fighting arena. Like that's basically it.
Yeah.
So that Callisto could be a better fighter. So second round, I don't know how many rounds these two have fought, but Storm and Callisto have another fight. But this time, Callisto's got tentacles. Storm's using powers. It's a little more ramped up.
Got it. Yeah.
Storm still wins, of course.
Of course.
But I think one of them, it was real close.
Okay.
But then the two of them end up starting a revolution of these fighters against Mask. And almost feel like they have like a romantic relationship.
That is heavily implied.
Yeah.
Even early on, there's like a point where this is very out of context, but Callisto is healing up and Marrow is like bursting through Storm's door and is like, where is she? Where is she? And then like, Storm is yelling at Marrow and they're fighting. And then Callisto comes out of the bedroom just with a sheet over her, nude, and like it's like, no, I'm healing. And you're like on the door, and I'm like, oh, Claremont, I see you.
It's weird though because Yukio's also there, and there's might be something there too. I don't know. It's all very vague.
It's all very Claremont,
but it's very Claremont. Like there's all like if you want to, it is definitely if you want to read into it, it's there
for sure. Yes,
but if you are oblivious, maybe it's not there.
If you like Mohawk Storm, you can thank Callisto because that's where it comes from. Them hanging out. Yes.
I don't doubt that.
It's true.
I followed her further because I was like, oh, like when does she lose the tentacle arms? Question mark.
I know.
Oh, did you find it?
I know what it is. Yeah. You probably could not because it probably was. It's M Day.
Okay,
that's she loses her
that's
powers.
what I thought. Is it just lost during that? Because that's what the research said, but I couldn't find. It wasn't like an explicit like here's a shot of her losing her whatever. It's she just like shows up one point and they're like later. She doesn't have powers and you're like oh and our normal arms.
Yeah,
but if you weren't paying attention,
Yeah. You would be like, wait, what happened? That's what happened.
Okay. So I didn't miss anything then.
No,
Good.
you didn't.
Good.
You didn't.
Because she was on the X-Men for a minute with tentacle arms.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Callisto has been on the X-Men, I guess, but never really. It's really interesting because like Callisto, so she takes care of the Morlocks and a lot of like other kids who like don't necessarily have it really easy. There's like a really interesting conversation between her and Storm during this kind of subplot with Marrow. So Marrow is a young mutant who's able to like grow bones out of her skin and then like chuck them and like pull it off. And so she like, doesn't.
There's a character later in this movie that I'm pretty sure is supposed to be Marrow, and we'll get into that.
Yeah. But long story short with that, like she basically has this long conversation with Storm where it's talking about how that she was raising Marrow, but she sent her to live with the X-Men to give her a shot at life, and also accuses Aurora and the X-Men for saving the compliant Kitty Prides and leaving the Sarahs in the dust. Sarah's Marrow's name. And even that, when they're friends and they're working on the same side and they're both trying to like help, there's this feeling from the part of Callisto that the X-Men are still concerned with like conventional beauty, conventional behaviors that she doesn't really fit in with. And that's always been the truth. She can be kind of gray because of that reasoning. But what I think is interesting, I'm going to segue into the story that I want to talk about today, is that the idea of beauty and conventional beauty and Callisto's stance on it has actually shifted quite a bit. There is a story that is interesting, if not my personal favorite.
Okay.
So there is a point at which Callisto gets kind of kidnapped by Mask and brought down to kind of the Morlock realm, the tunnels, and tortured. I'm not going to get into details of why. It's irrelevant. Basically, they think that she's not doing her part with the Morlocks.
Okay.
And Mask decides that to punish Callisto, they're going to take her and make her conventionally beautiful, and thereby losing all of her powers and training and ability, whatever, but also so beautiful that like people can't help but be enthralled. So there is quite a few issues in which Callisto becomes this like a supermodel. Mask forced her to be like in photo shoots because at this point she has now lost her ability for combat and forces her to be a supermodel.
Which is weird because what you were saying before is that her looks weren't based around her mutant ability.
Right. Her looks are because of the accident.
Right.
And so that Mask like kind of restored her beauty, but then even further to make her like particularly beautiful. During this period of time, while she is undergoing this punishment of like suffering, quote unquote, kind of, to be this like beautiful supermodel.
How dare you be so beautiful?
But like lose your, which I did think that was interesting because it's like Callisto isn't about that anymore. And like, there's an
She's
aspect
moved
to
past
it.
that.
Yeah. This is actually when she comes across Colossus.
Oh, this is the weird point in X-Men where a bunch of the X-Men went through the Siege Perilous.
Exactly.
So the Siege Perilous.
We're going to talk about it.
I think we've never. I think we keep mentioning it, but here's the Cliff Notes version of it again. You go through the Siege Perilous. You come out the other side. You are a different person, like personality and looks. Like nobody sees you for who you were.
Yes.
And so Colossus is still a guy named Peter. What was his last name?
Oh, I didn't write it down. I'm sorry.
He's Peter something else.
Yeah.
But he is an artist now.
Right.
In New York City.
Yeah. It's basically a rebirth machine.
Yes.
I feel like if you really want to really whittle the Siege Perilous down, it's a gateway and it's a rebirth machine. This is how Storm becomes a resident of Cairo, Illinois instead of Egypt. It's very iconic. I love it. Long story short, Peter doesn't know who she is, like whatever. He's gone through the Siege Perilous. They start a relationship together because he is both enthralled by her beauty and also like her personality. This is a point where they like live together and she gets called like, and she's just living her life and she wants to stay with Peter and she wants to like She wants to continue dating him. He gets pulled away by the Shadow King and his memories are restored. And so they break up. But like, there's still that kind of thread between them. But she's still a supermodel.
Right.
And fortunately, there is a point at which the Morlocks, Mask has died. The Morlocks go to Callisto and ask her to return to be the leader of the Morlocks. Or they think the Mask has died. And Callisto says, no. Like, I love my life, actually, and I'm great. Like, I love being beautiful. This is the turn I don't love.
Yeah.
Don't love it. She rejects them. They basically beat her and disfigure her again.
Well, I mean, if that's what it takes to get you back in the Morlocks.
She ends up recuperating.
I can see why they did it. I'm not saying I like it, but I can see the logic behind it.
Yeah. She ends up recuperating in the X Mansion for a little bit and goes kind of off the deep end when she wakes up and realizes that she's lost her beauty again. It is, I don't love it. I don't love the plot line because I think the cool part of Callisto is that like she recognizes the trap that just being beautiful like is and becomes a cool like baddie basically and like lives that life. And so to kind of have her go through this dip, it's okay because like at the end of the day she didn't become that. Like the end of the conclusion is like her and Aurora and Mask is begging for their life and they defeat Mask this time for real. And Mask threatens to like, or not threatens, is like, I will make you beautiful again, like just let me go. And Callisto's like, no, I don't need that. And like that's kind of like the girl power moment.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
But I do think it's interesting because like this kind of concept of beauty with this character at the beginning was she doesn't need it. And then like there's a big part of her story where it's like, well, she kind of does like it. And then, but she like, she recovers herself.
Yeah.
How you want to read that is fine. But
I think it's probably read more of like how society treats beauty, you know, where it's like, if you get the attraction, life is easier.
Yes.
So why not make life easier?
For sure.
I think it also kind of, because it, like you said, she kind of doesn't have her mutant powers anymore. So it is like more like, well, what if you were just human and not only human, but like the easy road of human,
you were
like an
supermodel.
attractive human.
Yeah.
Like, isn't that a little easier? Isn't that a little nicer?
Yeah. And I do think, I don't think it's like the worst story in the world. I think it's a little, I think I would like I said, I would love it if we had more of an intense backstory with Callisto, because really at the end of the day, this is kind of what we got. There's some stuff with
I
McHale
think maybe
and
that's
other
what
stuff,
they're trying to do. Maybe is like, well, we didn't give her a backstory, so this is kind of what it was like.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah.
Like they're kind of trying to address that a little.
Which I guess if that was her backstory to begin with, and then they did it again.
Yeah, it's so vague though as to not really be done. So I don't mind
don't do
it
it now, though.
necessarily.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I kind of would want something different. Like let's do something a little different. Like most people I would guess don't remember that story. I don't think it was particularly loved.
Maybe not.
So
Colossus's name was Peter Nicholas.
Peter Nicholas. That's what it was.
What it was.
Thank you.
Famous artist.
Yes, he's like, a painter, right? Yeah. The Siege
But
Perilous.
he couldn't turn into his armored form.
That is true.
Yeah.
And there's so much. God, the Storm Gambit side story in Illinois, like, so good. Anyway, the thieving together, big fan. I love the Siege
I haven't
Perilous.
read that stuff, but I keep jumping around. I'm sure I'll hit it one of these days.
I mean, that's kind of it. Like I mentioned earlier, she's kind of a mother figure to Marrow in particular. There's like quite a few stories with the Marrow storyline in Aurora that like she shows up in. She's in Marauders in the Krakoan era for some of it, but nothing like crazy.
No, I wouldn't say anything too crazy.
Yeah, at least from what I've read.
She's real punk rock.
Yeah, she's cool.
And
Callisto's cool.
That's always good for me.
And I think it's really hard. Like I said earlier, it's like the concept of like it's harder when the X-Men are being super oppressed by the world around them. Mm-hmm. The Morlocks are really good when the X-Men are on good terms with humans.
Yes.
When the X-Men are on bad terms with humans, the Morlocks kind of become allies and become just kind of subsumed by like the X people in general.
Yeah.
But when it's the other way around and they're a little bit more with the humans, then the Morlocks become like the friction, which I think is kind of interesting, but hasn't really been where the Marvel Universe has gone with the X-Men recently.
Yeah.
So the Morlocks, they kind of been a little left to the side. So.
I mean, they probably were most of them around just Krakoa
exactly
for the longest time, and
Yeah.
they were just allowed to exist because there's
Right.
so many everything
Right.
there.
Yeah. So, like, that you have Genosha, you have like the Morlocks suffer a lot of losses because they end up congregating in the places where like it's the last safe space for mutants.
Oh, you mean
So,
they're being accepted and then
Yeah.
in the place where everyone
Yeah.
just ends up dying?
Yeah. It's pretty brutal.
Go watch X-Men 97.
That's actually a part of the reason why I actually have one correction. A lot of the Morlocks are not on Krakoa
No?
for that reason exactly.
Oh.
Like I remember, I think it was in Marauders where they're on their own ship.
Okay.
If
I missed that.
Yes, there's one. It's a one little thing. I'm not sure if at the end of it they end up going to Krakoa at that, but there is a point in that storyline where the little Morlocks that are left, which there's not all that many of them, are just like, no, we did this actually already, and then we all died, so we're not gonna do that again.
Sure.
So anyway,
Yeah, I didn't look in the Morlocks history of things, but it's funny when you start getting the conversation of it. You're like, what happened to them anyway?
yeah, right.
So, all right. Well, I think that wraps up our nice little Callisto highlight.
She's so great.
I've been producer James,
And I'm Sasha.
and we'll see you for the next 10.